Welcome to the Battleground Chronicles World War II channel. Subscribe to our channel because every day we publish stories about the valor of American soldiers based on real events. Support us. Like our videos if you like what we do for you. The morning sun casts gentle rays across Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The waters are calm, the sky a brilliant blue. Aboard the USS Arizona, 1,512 sailors and officers prepare for another routine Sunday. Some are still asleep in their bunks. Others stand on deck, breathing in the warm Hawaiian air. In the mess hall, breakfast is being served. Coffee cups steam. Letters from home remain unread in pockets. Photographs of loved ones sit in lockers. The massive 608-foot Pennsylvania-class battleship rests quietly at her berth along Ford Island, her 14-inch guns silent, her steel hull gleaming. None of these men know that in less than 1 hour, 1,177 of them will perish in what will become one of the most horrific mass deaths in American military history. The USS Arizona has been at Pearl Harbor since April 1940, when the Pacific Fleet's home port was moved from California to Hawaii as a deterrent to Japanese imperialism. The ship has recently returned from training exercises, mooring at Pearl Harbor on December 6, just the day before. The repair ship USS Vestal is tied alongside to assist with minor maintenance. Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd and Captain Franklin Van Valkenburg are aboard. The sailors feel safe within the shelter of the harbor, protected by 12,500 tons of armor. But 230 miles to the north, 6 Japanese aircraft carriers have secretly positioned themselves in the Pacific. Their flight decks are busy with activity. Pilots climb into their cockpits. Mechanics make final adjustments. Bombs are loaded. Torpedoes are armed. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's plan is about to be executed with devastating precision. The men of the Arizona go about their morning routines, unaware that these are their final moments of peace. These are their final breaths of safety. These are the final heartbeats of normalcy before their world erupts into flame, smoke, and death. These are the final moments before they become part of history. 07:55 hours, December 7, 1941. Seaman First Class Donald Stratton steps onto the deck of the USS Arizona and gazes up at the sky. The morning air is clear and warm, just another Sunday in paradise. Then, his eyes narrow. Something is wrong. Dots appear on the horizon, growing larger with each passing second. "What in the dickens is that?" Stratton says to a nearby cook who has joined him outside. The cook peers up, shielding his eyes from the sun. The distant humming grows louder. Then they see it. Red dots painted on the wings of approaching aircraft. "The Japanese are here," Stratton whispers, the words barely escaping his lips before the air raid alarm blares across the ship. Across the harbor, American sailors witness strange sights in the water. At 06:45 hours, the destroyer USS Ward spots what appears to be a miniature submarine attempting to follow a cargo ship through the entrance to the harbor. The Ward's crew engages and sinks the submarine with depth charges and gunfire, sending a report that fails to create sufficient alarm among command. Back on the Arizona, men scramble to battle stations. The ship's air raid alarm sounds at 07:55. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua, the ship's damage control officer, rushes to the quarterdeck. General quarters is sounded. Men who moments before were eating breakfast or reading letters from home now run to their posts, many still in their underwear. 19-year-old Seaman First Class John Anderson is about to have breakfast when he hears the first explosion. He rushes to the deck with a cook and watches in horror as Japanese planes sweep over the harbor, their machine guns chattering death. At 07:56 hours, Japanese bombers begin their attack runs on Battleship Row, where the Arizona sits moored. The air fills with the screech of diving aircraft. Anti-aircraft guns aboard the ships begin to fire, but many are unprepared, their ammunition locked away according to peacetime protocol. Quartermaster Louis Conter, 20 years old, is on the back decks of the battleship when the first bombs fall. He watches helplessly as explosions erupt across the harbor. Men are already dying. Blood already stains the decks of American ships. The first bombs to strike the Arizona are near misses, sending geysers of water into the air alongside the massive battleship. The men of the Arizona fight back. Despite the surprise, despite the chaos, they run to their guns. They load ammunition. They take aim at the enemy aircraft. They fight for their lives and for their ship. But the Japanese pilots have trained for this moment. They have rehearsed this attack for months. And they have the advantage of complete surprise. The water around the Arizona begins to churn with explosions. The air fills with smoke and the screams of wounded men. And the worst is yet to come. 0806 hours, December 7, 1941. The sound begins as a high-pitched whistle, cutting through the cacophony of anti-aircraft fire, explosions, and shouting men. A 1,760-pound bomb, released from a high-altitude Japanese bomber, plummets toward the USS Arizona. Seaman Donald Stratton, at his battle station on the portside anti-aircraft director, looks up. The bomb arcs through the air with terrible purpose. Time seems to slow as the massive projectile falls. The bomb strikes the forward deck of the Arizona, approximately 40 feet from the bow. It penetrates the steel deck as if it were paper. It punches through multiple decks in less than a second, and then it reaches the forward ammunition magazine. 0808 hours. The world ends. 1 million pounds of gunpowder ignite simultaneously. The force of the explosion is so violent that it lifts the massive battleship, all 31,400 tons of it, out of the water. The forward part of the Arizona rises 30 to 40 feet into the air before crashing back down. The explosion is so powerful that it is felt throughout the harbor. Windows shatter in buildings miles away. A massive fireball erupts from the center of the ship, shooting hundreds of feet into the air. The concussive force is so intense that it knocks sailors off nearby vessels. Inside the Arizona, the blast moves faster than the human nervous system can register pain. Men in the immediate vicinity are vaporized instantly. Those slightly farther away are torn apart by the pressure wave or incinerated by the fireball that consumes the forward section of the ship. The Arizona essentially breaks in two. The bow rises and then falls, taking hundreds of men to their deaths. Water rushes into the fractured hull. Ammunition continues to cook off, creating secondary explosions throughout the vessel. On the burning deck, Seaman Stratton and 5 other men are trapped on a platform, their skin burning, their lungs searing from the superheated air. The water below them is on fire, covered with burning oil that has leaked from the ship's ruptured fuel tanks. The Arizona continues to burn. Black, acrid smoke pours from her shattered hull. Men who survived the initial blast now face new horrors, flames that pursue them through passageways, compartments filling with water, choking smoke that makes each breath an agony. In the radio room, operators send their final messages. In engine spaces, men struggle to secure systems that are already beyond salvation. In medical stations, corpsmen treat the wounded even as their own ship dies around them. And still the bombs fall, and still men die. The Arizona sinks to the bottom of the harbor, settling in the mud approximately 40 feet below the surface. Parts of her superstructure remain above water, allowing some survivors to escape. But for many, too many, the Arizona becomes both a funeral pyre and a tomb. 08:10 hours, December 7, 1941. The Arizona burns with apocalyptic intensity. The forward part of the ship is completely engulfed in flames that reach hundreds of feet into the air. The heat is so intense that it blisters paint on ships moored hundreds of yards away. On a platform high on the burning ship's mast, 6 men cling to life. Seaman Donald Stratton, Seaman First Class Russell Lott, Seaman First Class Earl Reiner, Seaman First Class Harold Kuhn, Seaman First Class Alvin Dvorak, and Fire Controlman Third Class Lauren Bruner are trapped. Their skin hangs in strips from their bodies. Their uniforms have been burned away. The metal beneath their feet grows hotter with each passing second. 70 feet away, on the repair ship USS Vestal, Boatswain's mate Second Class Joe George sees the men waving desperately through the smoke and flames. "We need help," Stratton shouts, his voice barely audible over the roar of the inferno, and the continuing explosions of Japanese bombs across the harbor. George throws a weighted heaving line toward the men. It falls short. He tries again, and again. On his fourth attempt, the line reaches the desperate survivors. Stratton, his hands burned to the bone, secures the line to the Arizona. An officer on the Vestal orders George to cut the line connecting the two ships. The Arizona is doomed, and the Vestal must save herself. "Those men are going to die if we don't help them," George shouts back, defying the direct order. The 6 men, already suffering from horrific burns covering more than 60% of their bodies, now face a new challenge. They must traverse the 70-foot gap hand over hand along the rope, suspended above burning oil on the water's surface. One by one, they make the journey. Their burned hands leave flesh on the rope. They grit their teeth against pain that exceeds human capacity to endure. But they move, inch by excruciating inch. Elsewhere on the Arizona, other acts of heroism unfold in the face of certain death. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua, the ship's damage control officer, calmly directs firefighting efforts and the evacuation of wounded sailors, even as the ship burns beneath his feet. He will later be awarded the Medal of Honor for his distinguished conduct, extraordinary courage, and disregard of his own safety. Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd, the first flag officer killed in the Pacific War, dies on the bridge of the Arizona while commanding Battleship Division 1. Captain Franklin Van Valkenburg, the ship's commanding officer, also perishes on the bridge, attempting to defend his vessel until the very end. In the ship's band compartment, all 21 members of Navy Band Unit 22 are killed. They had been preparing to play music for the morning flag-raising ceremony when the attack began. They immediately moved to their battle stations beneath one of the ship's gun turrets. No other military band in American history has died in combat as a single unit. Throughout the Arizona, sailors refused to abandon their posts, despite the inferno consuming the ship around them. Gun crews continue to fire at Japanese aircraft, even as flames engulf their positions. Damage control teams fight hopeless battles against unstoppable fires. Corpsmen treat the wounded with their own bodies burning. The 6 men on the line continue their desperate crossing. Harold Kuhn reaches the Vestal first, then Russell Lott, then Lauren Bruner, so severely burned that the skin peels from his hands as he grips the rope, then Donald Stratton, then Earl Reiner. Finally, Alvin Dvorak, the last man to escape the Arizona. They collapse on the deck of the Vestal, their ordeal not over. The Vestal itself has been hit by 2 bombs and is beginning to sink. Its crew, under the command of Commander Cassin Young, who himself had been blown overboard by the force of the Arizona's explosion and swam back to his ship, works frantically to save their vessel. The 6 men rescued from the Arizona lie on the deck, their burns so severe that witnesses later report seeing skins sliding off their bodies like wet paper. 8:25 hours, December 7, 1941. The harbor has become a vision of hell. 8 American battleships have been damaged or sunk. Cruisers, destroyers, and auxiliary vessels burn alongside them. Oil from ruptured fuel tanks spreads across the water's surface in a thick black blanket that ignites, turning the harbor itself into a sea of flames. Seaman John Anderson, having been ordered into a motor launch from the Arizona, returns to the burning ship to search for survivors. He helps pull 3 badly wounded men from the water, but as they return to shore, a Japanese shell hits their small boat, killing all aboard except Anderson. With the Arizona lost, Anderson finds himself swimming through burning oil, dodging bullets from strafing Japanese aircraft. He helps other struggling swimmers reach Ford Island before finally collapsing on the beach, exhausted and in shock. The oil from the Arizona's ruptured bunkers, nearly 1.5 million gallons, continues to pour into the harbor. The thick black substance sticks to the bodies of swimmers, weighing them down, clogging their nostrils and mouths. Men drown in the viscous fluid, unable to keep their faces above the surface. The water itself becomes a deadly trap. Those who jump to escape the flames aboard their ships find themselves in water covered with burning oil. Some dive deep, swimming beneath the layer of fire, but many don't make it. Their lungs give out, or they become disoriented, or they surface into the inferno. Aboard what remains of the Arizona, Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua continues to direct rescue efforts. The ship's stern, though damaged, remains above water. Fuqua organizes the evacuation of wounded men, maintaining remarkable composure amid the chaos and destruction. "I can still see him standing there," a survivor later recalls, giving orders and directing the rescue of wounded men, as if he were on the parade grounds at Annapolis. Throughout the harbor, small boats brave the burning oil and continuing air attacks to rescue survivors from the water and from sinking ships. Civilian vessels join military craft in the rescue effort. Harbor personnel, many of them wounded themselves, pull exhausted swimmers from the water. The human cost becomes clearer with each passing minute. Bodies float in the harbor, some burned beyond recognition, others appearing eerily peaceful, as if asleep on the water's surface. Parts of bodies wash ashore on the beaches of Ford Island, grotesque remnants of men who moments earlier had been whole. The Arizona continues to burn, sending a massive column of black smoke thousands of feet into the air. The smoke can be seen from every point on Oahu, a dark exclamation mark announcing America's entry into World War II. Inside the sunken battleship, hundreds of men remain trapped. Some are already dead, killed by the initial explosion or subsequent fires. Others are alive but injured, trapped in air pockets or in compartments not yet reached by fire or water. Their tapping can be heard through the hull by rescue craft passing nearby. But for many, rescue will never come. The waters of Pearl Harbor, once clear and blue, have become black with oil and red with blood. And still the Arizona burns. 8:54 hours, December 7, 1941. Just as rescue efforts begin in earnest, a second wave of 171 Japanese aircraft arrives over Pearl Harbor. New explosions rock the harbor as bombs and torpedoes find fresh targets. The attack continues with methodical precision. Japanese dive bombers target ships that survived the first assault. Fighters strafe airfields, destroying aircraft on the ground before they can take off to challenge the attackers. Near the burning Arizona, small boats attempting to rescue survivors come under machine gun fire from Japanese aircraft. Bullets stitch the water around them. Some rescuers are killed, but most continue their work, ignoring the danger. The 6 survivors from the Arizona who made it to the Vestal are transferred to Ford Island as the repair ship prepares to get underway. Their burns are so severe that medical personnel initially believe they cannot survive. Donald Stratton's weight will eventually drop from 170 pounds to 92 pounds during his recovery. Throughout the harbor, the scene is one of incredible devastation, mixed with incredible bravery. Men who have never seen combat before respond with courage that will become legendary. Sailors aboard the USS Nevada, the only battleship to get underway during the attack, fight to save their ship, even as Japanese aircraft concentrate their attention on the moving target. Machine guns from the burning Arizona continue to fire at Japanese planes, operated by gunners who refuse to abandon their posts despite the inferno around them. The guns fall silent only when their ammunition is exhausted, or their operators succumb to flames or wounds. Lieutenant Commander Edward Shepard, the Arizona's first lieutenant, organizes firefighting and rescue efforts from the quartermaster platform, refusing to leave until ordered to do so by Lieutenant Commander Fuqua. He helps dozens of wounded men escape the burning ship, before finally abandoning the Arizona himself. The second wave of the Japanese attack continues for approximately 1 hour. By the time the last aircraft departs, the devastation is nearly complete. All 8 American battleships in the harbor have been damaged or sunk. 18 other ships have been sunk or seriously damaged. 188 aircraft have been destroyed, and 2,403 Americans are dead or dying, with another 1,178 wounded. The Arizona accounts for nearly half of the total death toll, with 1,177 of her crew killed. The Oklahoma follows with 429 dead. The West Virginia loses 106 men. The California, 100. The other ships in the harbor suffer smaller but still significant casualties. By 10 hours, the attack is over. The Japanese aircraft returned to their carriers, leaving behind a scene of carnage and destruction that will forever alter the course of history. And still, the Arizona burns. Darkness falls over Pearl Harbor, but the night is illuminated by the fires that continue to burn on the Arizona and other stricken ships. The battleship has become a funeral pyre for hundreds of sailors and Marines who will never leave her. Rescue efforts continue through the night. Small boats patrol the harbor searching for survivors in the water. Medical personnel work without rest, treating the wounded in overtaxed hospital facilities. The dead are collected and laid in rows awaiting identification. The Arizona burns for more than 2 days, the fires fed by fuel oil and material within the ship. The temperature of the fires is so intense that it melts metal and fuses machinery into unrecognizable masses. Personal belongings, photographs, letters, watches, wedding rings, are consumed or warped beyond recognition. Inside compartments not reached by fire or completely flooded, trapped sailors face a slow, terrible death. Some die from their wounds. Others succumb to toxic smoke. Some drown as water gradually fills their shrinking air pockets. The luckiest lose consciousness quickly and never wake again. Those tending to the wounded from the Arizona witness injuries unlike any they have seen before. Men with third-degree burns covering most of their bodies. Men with lungs seared by superheated air. Men with traumatic amputations from the force of explosions. Medical personnel do what they can, but many of the injured are beyond help. Donald Stratton, one of the 6 men rescued by Joe George's lifeline, is transferred to the hospital ship Solace. His burns are so severe that doctors initially give him little chance of survival. Yet he clings to life with the same determination that carried him across that rope. Throughout the night, secondary explosions continue to rock the Arizona as ammunition cooks off in the heat. Each new explosion sends burning debris into the air and causes the ship to settle further into the mud of the harbor bottom. The night seems endless for those standing watch over the wounded and the dead. The smell of burning oil, scorched metal, and charred flesh hangs in the air. The waters of the harbor lap against the shores of Ford Island, now contaminated with oil and blood. As dawn approaches on December 8th, the full extent of the disaster becomes clearer. The Arizona lies broken and burning, her once proud silhouette reduced to a jagged outline, barely visible above the water's surface. Her forward masts and superstructure protrude from the water at unnatural angles, twisted by the force of the explosion that doomed her. Below the surface, in the mud of Pearl Harbor, the Arizona has become both a warship and a tomb. December 8, 1941. As morning light illuminates the devastation at Pearl Harbor, the Arizona continues to burn. Smoke rises from her shattered hull, a black plume visible for miles. The ship has settled on the harbor bottom with her main deck approximately 30 feet below the surface. Parts of her superstructure remain above water, twisted metal and scorched gun turrets that point skyward like accusing fingers. Rescue teams that approach the wreck hear sounds that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Tapping comes from within the hull, desperate signals from men still alive but trapped in air pockets or in compartments not yet flooded or reached by fire. The rescuers tap back, acknowledging the signals, but for most of these men, there is no hope of rescue. Unlike the Oklahoma, which capsized but remained largely intact, allowing rescue teams to cut through the hull and save 32 trapped sailors, the Arizona has been catastrophically damaged. The explosion that sank her has rendered normal rescue operations impossible. Compartments are twisted and warped, passageways are blocked by debris or collapsed decks, and fires continue to burn in sections of the ship, making approach dangerous. Divers who attempt to reach trapped survivors find conditions impossible. Visibility in the oil-contaminated water is near zero. Sharp metal threatens to tear their equipment. The heat from still-burning sections of the ship makes the water dangerously hot, and time is running out for anyone still alive within the wreck. The tapping gradually diminishes as December 8th wears on. By nightfall, the wreck is silent, except for the occasional pop of cooling metal or the hiss of steam where seawater meets hot surfaces. The men of the Arizona who survived the initial explosion but were trapped below decks have succumbed to their injuries, to smoke inhalation, or to drowning as water gradually filled their shrinking air pockets. On the shore, at makeshift morgues set up to handle the unprecedented number of casualties, the grim work of identifying the dead continues. But for most of the Arizona's crew, there will be no body to identify, no remains to send home to grieving families. They will remain forever with their ship, entombed in the waters of Pearl Harbor. The few bodies that are recovered from the Arizona present challenges for identification. The intense heat of the explosions and fires has left many unrecognizable. Personal effects that might help with identification have been destroyed or damaged beyond usefulness. Dental records become crucial in the identification process, but even these prove insufficient in many cases. As December 9 dawns, the fires aboard the Arizona finally begin to subside. The ship continues to release oil from her ruptured bunkers, creating a rainbow sheen on the water's surface that will become known as black tears or tears of the Arizona. This oil slick will continue for decades, a visible reminder of the disaster long after the fires are extinguished. Official salvage operations begin almost immediately, but it quickly becomes apparent that the Arizona cannot be saved. Unlike other damaged battleships at Pearl Harbor that will eventually be repaired and returned to service, the Arizona is a total loss. The focus shifts from salvage to recovery, of bodies, of usable equipment, of weapons that can be repurposed for the war effort that has just begun. The decision is made to leave most of the Arizona's crew entombed within the wreck. The ship has become a mass grave, a sacred space that will eventually be recognized as such with the construction of the USS Arizona Memorial. For now, though, the Arizona is simply a sunken battleship, one of many ships damaged or destroyed on December 7. But as the waters of Pearl Harbor gradually clear and life on Oahu adjusts to the new reality of war, the Arizona remains silent, broken, a steel coffin for 1,102 men whose bodies will never leave her. December 10 through 31, 1941. As the immediate shock of the attack subsides, the full accounting of the disaster begins. The numbers are staggering. 2,403 Americans killed, 1,178 wounded, 8 battleships damaged or sunk, 18 ships total lost or severely damaged, 188 aircraft destroyed, 159 aircraft damaged. But it is the human toll that defies comprehension. Families across America receive telegrams beginning with the words, "No parent, spouse, or child ever wants to read." The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you. On the USS Arizona, the losses include 23 sets of brothers. In total, 37 confirmed pairs or trios of brothers were assigned to the Arizona on December 7, 1941. Of these 77 men, 62 were killed. Only one full set of brothers, Kenneth and Russell Warner, survived the attack, and only because Kenneth was away at flight school in San Diego that day. The ship's only father and son pair, Thomas Augusta Free and his son, William Thomas Free, both perish in the attack. They die together, as do so many brothers serving side by side. The surviving crew members of the Arizona, now scattered to hospital beds across Hawaii and the mainland, begin the long process of recovery. For men like Donald Stratton, with burns covering more than 60% of his body, this means months of agonizing treatment, skin grafts, debridement of necrotic tissue, physical therapy to preserve mobility in damaged joints. Lauren Bruner, with burns covering 73% of his body, faces similar challenges. So do the other men rescued from the Arizona's burning platform. Of the 6 who crossed the line to the Vestal, 1, Alvin Dvorak, will die on Christmas Eve 1941, succumbing to his injuries despite weeks of treatment. The psychological wounds are as deep as the physical ones. Survivors describe nightmares that will plague them for decades. They recall the screams of dying comrades, the sight of men burning alive, the sound of tapping from within the sunken hull, signaling men who could not be saved. Some survivors experience crushing guilt. Why did they live when so many others died? Could they have done more to save their shipmates? These questions haunt them through sleepless nights and into the uncertain future. For the families of the dead, The grieving process is complicated by the unique nature of the disaster. Most of the men lost on the Arizona will remain entombed in the ship. There will be no body to bury, no grave to visit. Their final resting place is at the bottom of Pearl Harbor, visible only as a shadowy outline beneath the surface. Memorial services are held across the nation. President Franklin D. Roosevelt addresses a joint session of Congress on December 8th, calling the attack a date which will live in infamy, and asking for a declaration of war against Japan. The vote is nearly unanimous. America mobilizes for war with a unity of purpose not seen in generations. Young men flock to recruiting stations, eager to avenge Pearl Harbor. Among them is Donald Stratton, who, after recovering from his horrific burns, will re-enlist in the Navy in 1944 and serve aboard the destroyer USS Stack for the remainder of the war. As 1941 draws to a close, the Arizona continues to release oil from her ruptured bunkers. 500,000 gallons remain trapped in the wreck, seeping out at a rate of approximately 9 quarts per day. This black tears phenomenon will continue for decades, a daily reminder of the sacrifice made by the ship and her crew. The year ends with America firmly at war. The surprise and shock of Pearl Harbor have given way to resolve and determination. But for the families of the Arizona's dead, and for the ship's few survivors, the horror of December 7 will never fully recede. It remains with them, a wound that never completely heals, a nightmare from which there is no waking. And still, the Arizona weeps her black tears into the waters of Pearl Harbor. January-December 1942. As America gears up for the long war ahead, decisions must be made about the wrecks at Pearl Harbor. Most of the damaged ships can be salvaged and returned to service. The USS Nevada, despite being severely damaged, will be repaired and will participate in the D-Day landings and the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The USS Tennessee, USS Maryland, USS Pennsylvania, USS California, and USS West Virginia will all eventually return to the fleet. But the USS Arizona and the USS Utah are beyond saving. The damage is too severe, the cost of salvage too high. On December 1, 1942, the Arizona is officially stricken from the Naval Vessel Register, formally acknowledging what has been obvious since December 7, 1941. The ship is lost. Before this official acknowledgement, limited salvage operations are conducted on the Arizona. Usable equipment is removed. The ship's aft gun turrets are salvaged, their massive 14-inch guns removed for use in shore batteries guarding the Hawaiian Islands against possible Japanese invasion. Other weapons, ammunition, and equipment are also recovered. But the most difficult and emotionally challenging aspect of the salvage operation involves the recovery of remains. Navy divers work under horrific conditions to retrieve bodies from accessible parts of the wreck. The water is contaminated with oil and debris. Visibility is near zero. The divers must feel their way through twisted metal compartments, always at risk of entanglement or injury. The bodies they recover present challenges for identification. After weeks underwater, facial recognition is impossible in most cases. Dental records and personal effects become crucial. Dog tags, if present and legible, provide the most reliable means of identification. As the recovery effort continues, a grim reality becomes apparent. Most of the Arizona's dead cannot be reached without dismantling large sections of the ship, an operation that would be both technically challenging and prohibitively expensive. The decision is made to leave these men entombed in the ship. The Arizona becomes not just a wreck, but a military cemetery. For the families of the entombed, this decision brings mixed emotions. There is no body to bury in the family plot, no grave to visit on Memorial Day. Yet there is also a certain solace in knowing that their loved ones remain with their shipmates, part of the brotherhood that defined their naval service. Throughout 1942, the visible portions of the Arizona's superstructure are gradually removed. The ship's masts and navigation bridge are cut away, partly to recover valuable materials and partly to remove navigational hazards in the active harbor. By the end of the year, Little remains visible above the water except for a few portions of the superstructure and the barbettes of the gun turrets. But the bulk of the Arizona remains where she sank, settling deeper into the mud of Pearl Harbor. Her hull becomes an artificial reef, attracting marine life. Fish swim through compartments that once housed sailors. Coral begins to grow on exposed metal surfaces. The process of reclamation by nature begins, even as the ship continues to release oil from her ruptured bunkers. The black tears of the Arizona become a familiar sight to those working in Pearl Harbor. Every day, droplets of oil rise from the wreck, spreading into a rainbow-colored sheen on the water's surface. Navy personnel come to see these oil droplets as the tears of the entombed sailors, a daily reminder of their sacrifice. As 1942 ends, the Arizona's story as an active warship is complete. She will not sail again, will not fire her guns in battle, will not carry her crew into harm's way. But her story as a memorial, as a symbol, as a sacred space is just beginning. Beneath the waters of Pearl Harbor, the Arizona waits and weeps. 1943-1949. As the war rages across the Pacific and in Europe, the Arizona and her dead fade from public consciousness. The nation focuses on battles being fought and lives being lost in current campaigns. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. New names and new casualties dominate the headlines and the public's attention. The Arizona becomes, for a time, just another sunken ship in Pearl Harbor. Military personnel working in the harbor grow accustomed to her presence. The oil that continues to leak from her bunkers becomes an accepted part of the harbor environment. Few visitors are allowed to see the wreck due to wartime security restrictions. But for the survivors of the Arizona and for the families of the dead, forgetting is impossible. Donald Stratton, having re-enlisted in the Navy despite his severe injuries, serves aboard the destroyer USS Stack in the Pacific Theater, participating in campaigns against the Japanese. His motivation is clear: to avenge his fallen shipmates from the Arizona. Lauren Bruner, after recovering from burns that covered 73% of his body, also returns to service. Like Stratton, he feels driven by a sense of duty to honor those who did not survive December 7. Other survivors of the Arizona find their own ways to carry on. Some remain in the Navy, others return to civilian life. All carry the physical and psychological scars of that Sunday morning in December 1941. Many suffer from what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety, depression. For the families of the entombed, the grieving process is complicated by the absence of traditional funeral rituals. There is no body to bury, no grave to visit. The Arizona herself becomes the tomb. But during the war years, families have no access to this final resting place. Some of the Arizona's dead are memorialized on the tablets of the missing at the Honolulu Memorial, which is established in 1944 to honor those lost in the Pacific Theater. Names are engraved in stone, providing families with a physical location where they can honor their loved ones. But it is not the same as a grave. In the immediate post-war years, from 1945 to 1949, Pearl Harbor transitions from a wartime naval base to a peacetime facility. Ships damaged in the attack but repaired and returned to service. The West Virginia, the Nevada, the Tennessee, the Maryland, the Pennsylvania continue their service in the post-war Navy or are decommissioned. But the Arizona remains where she sank, largely forgotten by the general public, but never forgotten by those who served aboard her or by the families of those who died with her. In 1949, the Navy begins to consider the future of the Arizona wreck. Should it be raised and scrapped? Should it be left as is? Should it be preserved as a memorial? These questions will take more than a decade to resolve definitively. On March 7, 1950, Admiral Arthur W. Radford, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, institutes the practice of raising the American flag over the remains of the Arizona. This simple ceremony marks the beginning of the Arizona's transformation from forgotten wreck to revered memorial. As the flag rises for the first time over the sunken battleship, It honors not just the 1,177 men who died aboard her on December 7, 1941, but all 2,403 Americans killed in the Pearl Harbor attack. The Arizona begins her second life, not as a weapon of war, but as a place of memory, reflection, and homage. And still she weeps her black tears. 1950 to 1962. As the 1950s begin, public interest in the Arizona gradually reawakens. The Cold War with the Soviet Union reminds Americans of the importance of military preparedness, a lesson written in blood at Pearl Harbor. The Korean War, beginning in 1950, brings another generation of Americans into combat, creating new bonds of understanding with the veterans of World War II. In 1950, the first official commemoration ceremony is held at the Arizona site. A small wooden platform is erected above the wreck, allowing officials and family members to stand directly over the entombed sailors during memorial services. The raising of the American flag over the Arizona becomes a daily ritual, symbolizing the nation's continued remembrance of the sacrifice made there. Throughout the 1950s, various proposals are put forward for a permanent memorial. Some suggest raising the ship and moving it to shore as a static display. Others propose leaving it in place, but building a more substantial memorial platform above it. The debate continues for years, complicated by questions of funding, design, and the proper way to honor the dead. In 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signs legislation authorizing the creation of the USS Arizona Memorial. However, the bill does not provide funding for construction. This leads to a public fundraising campaign spearheaded by the newly formed Pacific War Memorial Commission. The effort receives a significant boost when Elvis Presley, recently discharged from the Army, performs a benefit concert at Pearl Harbor in March 1961. The concert raises over $50,000 for the Memorial Fund. Combined with private donations and congressional appropriations, the fund reaches its goal of $500,000. Architect Alfred Price, an Austrian who had been detained as an enemy alien in Hawaii following the Pearl Harbor attack, designs the memorial. His design is elegant and symbolic. A 184-foot-long structure spanning the mid-portion of the sunken battleship without touching it. The memorial has 3 sections: an entry and assembly room, a central area for ceremonies and observation, and the shrine room, where the names of the fallen are engraved on a marble wall. The design includes several deliberate symbolic elements. The structure sags in the center but rises at each end, representing the depression of the American spirit following the attack and its subsequent rise to victory in World War II. The 7 large windows in the assembly room represent the date of the attack, the 7th. 21 windows in the shrine room symbolize a 21-gun salute, or the highest military honors. Construction begins in 1960 and is completed in 1961. On Memorial Day 1962, the USS Arizona Memorial is officially dedicated. More than 200 survivors of the Arizona attend the ceremony, along with families of the dead, military officials, and dignitaries. The memorial is transferred to the National Park Service, which will operate it in cooperation with the Navy. During the dedication ceremony, survivors and family members cast flowers into the water above the sunken battleship. The petals float on the rainbow sheen of oil that still seeps from the Arizona's ruptured bunkers. This tradition of casting flowers onto the water will continue in subsequent memorial services. The memorial quickly becomes one of Hawaii's most visited sites. Visitors arrive by Navy launch, the same method still used today. They walk through the stark white structure, reading the names on the marble wall, gazing down at the shadowy outline of the ship visible below the water's surface. Many are moved to tears by the experience, particularly when they see the oil droplets rising from the wreck, the black tears that continue to flow more than 20 years after the sinking. For survivors like Donald Stratton and Lauren Bruner, the memorial provides a place to honor their fallen shipmates. They return for dedication ceremonies, memorial services, and private visits. They tell their stories to new generations, ensuring that the sacrifice of the Arizona's dead is not forgotten. The memorial becomes not just a monument to those lost on December 7, 1941, but a broader symbol of sacrifice in service to country. It reminds visitors of the cost of unpreparedness and the value of vigilance. And it serves as a place of reconciliation, where former enemies can meet in peace and mutual respect. Beneath the memorial, the Arizona continues her slow dissolution in the waters of Pearl Harbor. Marine life makes a home in her rusting hull. Coral grows on her exposed surfaces, but she remains fundamentally what she became on December 7, 1941. A tomb for 1,102 sailors and Marines who will never leave her. And still she weeps. 1981 to 2001. As decades pass, the ranks of Arizona survivors thin. Men who were young sailors in 1941 become middle-aged, then elderly. Some die from natural causes. Others succumb to illnesses related to their Pearl Harbor injuries, particularly respiratory problems resulting from smoke inhalation or burns to the lungs. In 1981, the USS Arizona Reunion Association is formed, bringing together survivors of the battleship for regular meetings and commemorative events. The association also includes family members of those killed in the attack, creating a bond between those who survived and those who lost loved ones. A year later, in 1982, a significant new tradition begins. The Navy announces that survivors of the USS Arizona can choose to have their cremated remains interred within the wreck upon their deaths. Following a full military funeral at the Arizona Memorial, the urn containing the ashes is placed by Navy divers in one of the ship's gun turrets. This practice provides a powerful way for survivors to rejoin their shipmates in death, completing a circle that began on December 7, 1941. For many Arizona survivors, the decision to be interred in the ship represents the ultimate expression of the bond they feel with those who did not survive the attack. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, anniversary commemorations at the Arizona Memorial grow in significance. The 50th anniversary in 1991 is particularly momentous, with extensive media coverage and the attendance of President George H.W. Bush. Hundreds of Pearl Harbor survivors, including those from the Arizona, attend the ceremonies. The 1990s also see increased Japanese visitation to the memorial. Former enemies become partners in remembrance, with joint American-Japanese ceremonies emphasizing reconciliation and peace. This evolution reflects the memorial's broader significance as a symbol not just of American sacrifice, but of the human cost of war and the possibility of healing historical wounds. Environmental concerns about the continuing oil leak from the Arizona arise in the mid-1990s. Studies are conducted to determine the long-term effects of the approximately 9 quarts of oil that still seep from the wreck each day. However, many view the oil not as pollution, but as a sacred phenomenon, the tears of the Arizona that physically connect the past to the present. The National Park Service, which administers the memorial, faces the challenge of balancing preservation of the historic wreck with environmental considerations. The decision is made to continue monitoring the situation, but not to take actions that would stop the oil release, acknowledging the symbolic importance of the tears to veterans and families. As the new millennium begins, the number of living Arizona survivors continues to decrease. By 2001, the 60th anniversary of the attack, fewer than 100 remain. Those who can still travel return to Pearl Harbor for the commemoration, their presence a living link to the events of December 7, 1941. These elderly men, now in their late 70s and 80s, become treasured repositories of first-hand accounts. They speak at schools, historical societies, and veterans organizations. They give interviews to historians, journalists, and documentary filmmakers. They understand that when they are gone, the Arizona story will pass from memory to history. Donald Stratton, one of the 6 men saved by Joe George's lifeline, becomes particularly active in preserving the Arizona's legacy. He advocates for the recognition of George's heroism, beginning a campaign that will eventually lead to George receiving a posthumous Bronze Star with Combat V for Valor in 2017. The Arizona survivors also become instrumental in shaping how future generations will understand the Pearl Harbor attack. Their personal testimonies provide details and perspectives that official reports and historical documents cannot capture. The sounds, the smells, the emotions of that Sunday morning in 1941. As 2001 draws to a close, the survivors of the Arizona face a sobering reality. Their numbers continue to dwindle. Time is doing what Japanese bombs could not, claiming the last witnesses to one of the most significant events in American history. But the Arizona remains, and weeps, and remembers. 2002-2025. The new millennium brings accelerating change to the USS Arizona Memorial and to the dwindling number of survivors. In 2010, the memorial site is expanded and renamed the World War II Valor in the Pacific National Monument, encompassing not just the Arizona, but other sites related to the Pearl Harbor attack. As technology advances, new methods allow for better preservation and documentation of the Arizona wreck. Underwater archaeology techniques enable detailed mapping and monitoring without disturbing the war grave. Three-dimensional imaging creates virtual models that allow researchers and the public to see parts of the ship that lie beneath the mud of Pearl Harbor. The oil that continues to leak from the Arizona's bunkers receives renewed attention. Studies confirm that approximately 500,000 gallons remain within the wreck, still seeping out at a rate of up to 9 quarts per day. Environmental scientists predict that the oil will continue to leak for many more decades, perhaps even centuries. The black tears phenomenon takes on additional significance as the number of human survivors decreases. The oil becomes a physical manifestation of memory, a tangible connection to December 7, 1941, that will continue long after all human witnesses are gone. By 2015, fewer than 10 Arizona survivors remain alive. Their advanced age, most are in their mid-90s, makes travel to Pearl Harbor increasingly difficult. Yet some still make the journey for significant anniversaries, determined to honor their fallen shipmates as long as they are able. December 7, 2016, marks the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. 5 Arizona survivors attend the commemoration: Lauren Bruner, Donald Stratton, Lou Conter, Ken Potts, and Lonnie Cook. These men, all in their 90s, may be participating in their final major anniversary event. The ceremony is particularly poignant, a passing of the torch from living memory to recorded history. In 2017, after decades of effort by Donald Stratton and Lauren Bruner, Joe George is finally recognized for his heroism in saving 6 men from the burning Arizona. On December 7 of that year, George's daughter accepts a posthumous Bronze Star with Combat V on behalf of her father during a ceremony at Pearl Harbor. In December 2019, Lauren Bruner, the second-to-last man to escape the burning Arizona, dies at age 98. Following his wishes, his ashes are interred in the Arizona, rejoining the shipmates he left behind on December 7, 1941. He becomes the 44th and final survivor to choose interment in the ship, as the remaining survivors have indicated they wish to be buried elsewhere. On February 15, 2020, Donald Stratton passes away at age 97. The man who survived burns over 65% of his body, who re-enlisted in the Navy despite his injuries, who spent decades working to honor the memory of the Arizona's dead and to secure recognition for Joe George, is gone. Respecting his wishes, he is buried in his home state of Nebraska rather than in the Arizona. On April 1, 2024, Lou Conter, the last living survivor of the USS Arizona, dies at age 102. With his passing, the final living link to the Arizona's crew is severed. The ship's story now passes entirely into history rather than memory. As of 2025, the Arizona continues her long dissolution in the waters of Pearl Harbor. Portions of her hull have collapsed. Marine growth covers much of her structure. Yet she remains fundamentally intact, a time capsule of December 7, 1941, and a tomb for over 1,100 sailors and Marines. The memorial above her continues to receive more than 1.5 million visitors annually. Many are moved to tears by the experience of standing above the sunken battleship, reading the names on the marble wall, seeing the oil droplets rise to the surface. The Arizona has now been a memorial longer than she was an active warship. She served in the Navy for 25 years, from her commissioning in 1916 to her sinking in 1941. She has been a memorial for 83 years, from 1941 to 2025. In her second role, she has arguably had a greater impact than in her first. As an active warship, she never fired her guns in combat. As a memorial, she has taught generations about sacrifice, remembrance, and the cost of war. And still she weeps her black tears into the waters of Pearl Harbor. And still she guards her dead. And still she remembers that Sunday morning in December when the world changed forever. The USS Arizona remains where she sank on December 7, 1941, a permanent fixture in Pearl Harbor and in American history. The memorial that spans her broken hull continues to draw visitors from around the world, including many Japanese tourists who come to pay their respects to those who died. The "Black Tears" phenomenon persists. Studies suggest that the remaining oil in the Arizona's bunkers may continue to leak for up to 500 more years at the current rate. Environmental monitoring continues, but the consensus remains that this oil release is not just pollution, but a sacred connection to the past, a physical manifestation of memory that should be allowed to continue as long as naturally possible. All human survivors of the Arizona are now gone, their stories preserved in oral histories, books, documentaries, and museum exhibits. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren continue to visit the memorial, maintaining a family connection to the events of December 7, 1941. The Arizona herself continues to change. Marine growth covers much of her structure. Sections of her hull have collapsed, yet the fundamental integrity of the wreck remains, protected by its status as a war grave and by ongoing preservation efforts. The memorial has evolved from a specific tribute to the Arizona's dead to a broader symbol of sacrifice in war, the importance of preparedness, and the possibility of reconciliation between former enemies. Joint American-Japanese memorial services emphasize the peace and friendship that have replaced the hostility of 1941. On the morning of December 7th each year, a moment of silence is observed at 7:55 a.m., marking the time when the first Japanese bombs fell on Pearl Harbor. In that silence, visitors to the memorial can sometimes hear the soft pinging of droplets as oil from the Arizona rises to the surface. The ship's tears, still falling after more than 8 decades. The Arizona continues her eternal watch over the harbor, her rusting hulk a more powerful memorial than any that could have been purpose-built. She remains exactly where history placed her, authentic and unmediated, a direct physical connection to December 7, 1941. And in the quiet hours of early morning, when the harbor is still and visitors have not yet arrived, the waters above the Arizona ripple with oil droplets rising from her ruptured bunkers. The black tears continue to flow, a ship still weeping for her dead after more than 80 years. Some say that the tears will cease only when the last man who died aboard the Arizona has been forgotten. If so, the oil may flow for centuries yet to come, for the men of the Arizona have achieved a kind of immortality in American memory. The Arizona's story, which began in pain and fire on December 7, 1941, has no end. It continues with each visitor who stands in the memorial and looks down at the shadowy outline of the ship. It continues with each oil droplet that rises to the surface. It continues in the silence of 1,102 men who remain eternally on duty, standing their final watch in the waters of Pearl Harbor. Thank you for listening. If you are also proud of the bravery of our soldiers, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical stories.